Once that,
Hi, I'm Sue Slominski. I've worked for great brands such as Comcast and IKEA. And growing up, I actually didn't know what I wanted to be. I kind of was aimlessly looking and fell into marketing and absolutely loved my career path. And I'm super excited to have met many, many years ago Ron Adams. And I'm very happy to be here on this podcast called Brandwashed. I'm also very excited about the lunch that he promised me once we finish this podcast. So
you're not
thank
supposed to
you, Ron,
tell
for
them
having
that.
me.
Well, thanks for joining us and agreeing to do this. Remember, I still have those pictures that we talked about, so just keep this
I
is
have
all above
pictures of
board.
you.
I guess you kind of do, actually. Well, no, thanks very much as being our initial guest. I thought it'd only be fitting, candidly, as I thought about this a little bit, as we launch this new podcast, that the person that was instrumental, one of the people, and you were certainly right at the top of that list of helping me start this company, now 14 years ago. 14 years ago, start Engage and get it going off the ground, that you be the first one to kind of kick us off. So thank you for agreeing to do this. I appreciate it.
Thank
I'm
you. Don't
always in
make
your
me
debt.
start crying as we start this because it's amazing that it's been 14
Yeah.
years and that we've
We're,
built, even before that, built such a great friendship, work relationship, friendship, helping. I worked with you, which was wonderful. And I think
yeah.
we've just had such a wonderful friendship, professionally and personally for more than 14 years then. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. One of the first people I met in Philly when I moved from good old South Florida. So no, thank you for everything. So I thought it'd be apropos because again you are that person I know so well, and you have worked for big brands, and you trusted us and trusted me, frankly, all those years ago. In launching some stuff, for you all, I guess Xfinity Home was that thing, back in the day. But I really wanted you, if at all possible, for you to talk about your marketing journey because we come. I think now that we're at this part in our career where we're more the elder statesmen of sorts, right, if you will. That I always like to really talk, about that and how we got into it because at least for me, I kind of stumbled into each thing as we went along, right? And I'd love to, for you to maybe explain that a little bit on your side.
Yeah. It's such a great question and one that as we get older, I reflect more and more on the journey. And I ask people that. I ask like students that, like what is that journey and what do they think they want? Because do you really know as you go through it? I started with I didn't know what I wanted to be. I fell into marketing. I fell into this path when I was 19, a couple years back. I worked for Subaru and I was a secretary at Subaru and that was my goal. And I actually loved the brand and I loved the company. But my boss at the time, I was on the sales team, and my boss at the time knew that I was like intrigued by advertising, but I didn't know what or why. I just knew that I was intrigued. And he had taken me on a trip to Bala Cynwyd, to McAdams, Richmond and Ong, which was their advertising agency for Penn Jersey Subaru back in the day. We're talking a long time ago. And when I was there, I just felt like this is where I wanted to be. But I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I could do. I just knew that was the path I needed to take. So I kind of started later, but then never looked back. I went to college. I got my marketing degree. I worked in advertising agencies, which I loved. There's a camaraderie in an advertising agency that you don't necessarily get on the client side. It's a lot of work, and you get to know the brand, but you kind of get to know that brand until they outgrow the agency, or until they have a new changing of the guard. So you're in it, but any time it can be lost.
Sure.
So it was a lot of work, and loved it. A lot of great friendships and just learning the ropes as you go, which is also agency life. You wear many, many hats. And then 2004 actually was when I transitioned from, at that point, the Star Group in Cherry Hill and moved over to Comcast, which was one of our clients. And I will tell you, it wasn't that I said, "Yay, I'm moving on." I was very afraid to make that transition. I was used to being in the advertising ad life kind of thing, a whole different world. And I was going to this huge client. And the funny part was that I had a fear, not just of change, which was actually true, but I had a fear of only working on one brand. And I was
I
like,
can appreciate that.
but it's
Absolutely.
but really, like, looking back, we're talking 20 years, looking back, like, one brand, it's not one brand. Comcast is,
Yeah.
even then was big. We were launching video on demand when I was on the agency side, and then moved on to the client side, still working on that. And then really, as we've seen in the last 20 years, the rest is history. It wasn't one brand, it wasn't one campaign, it wasn't one audience. And it was a really exciting journey to have had the agency background working on the marketing side of the organization and really understanding the depth and the personality of the brand. Comcast then transitioning into Xfinity to really showcase a brand and a personality to consumers. So it's just been a really, looking back and even through it, it's just kind of been a wild ride. I then went and worked with you, which I absolutely loved, and helping you with your branding, and working on clients, which was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed being back in the agency life again, and then transitioned to IKEA, which I spent 6 years working on a brand that I truly believe in its purpose and the value it brings to consumers. So it's really nice to work with a brand that very different than similar but different than Comcast, in helping to a global brand and working basically with people from around the world and building new relationships, and friendships, not just in the States, which was also fun. And now I'm on a journey to actually become a teacher. So one thing I've found in all of my path was that I love mentoring, I love coaching, I love teaching media, I love talking media, but I really like looking at that next generation and how can I provide support and help them kind of like see the world in a whole different lens.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Now, and we'll talk about them in a minute, because I think that again, as I said earlier on, it's our responsibility in a way, right? To I think bestow knowledge onto the next generation. I love doing that here at the office. Like I feel like sometimes a grandpa of sorts, but I do enjoy it. Having those conversations and talking about instances where I saw something that they should be aware of and all that. And again, it's really good. But we'll talk about that in a few. But let's go back to your time at Comcast. So you mentioned something pretty interesting, which I've thought about a lot over the years, as you can imagine, mostly being on the media or agency side, right? I've always been on the outside looking in, but one thing I've always appreciated is getting to know clients at a very like intimate level, to where I felt like I was always a part of the team, and I could really I was in the room where it happened. I could have conversations and be knowledgeable enough about the brands going on, even if I'm sitting on the outside, to make sure I have that appreciation of what's happening behind the scenes, that I could make recommendations based on our media knowledge, or things outside of the organization, right? From an outsider looking in, but with having that understanding. So it was a fear of mine for years, like, get to your point, like working on one brand, because I like, generally myself, it's always been a preference for me to work on different brands, because I can see different perspectives at different times, and it kind of keeps me fresh, if you will.
Yes.
But I guess when you work for such a large company like Comcast, I mean, a Fortune 50 company, right? Say it. You have the chance to really see things and work on things that just go beyond. So talk to me a little bit about, like, what you saw in the media landscape, like, launching of new products, which I know you were instrumental in many things, not just video on demand, but we can start
Right.
there.
That
But
was
I
the start.
remember, many, many things that you did, the rebranding of Xfinity, all those, like, there's quite a few things there, that you did. So talk to me about, like, that evolution of media and how during those times, how did you, like, tackle those things and really make it a part of that strategy, moving forward?
Yeah. The start really was video on demand, of the Comcast making a whole lot of changes, and the competitive structure changing a lot. I think one thing before we go to that, I just want to call out the importance of having your agency partner and your vendors and whoever's part of it to feel like the team. And I think when I didn't launch anything, we launched a lot. And we and we has been such a big word for me, and that does date back to agency life. But no one's doing it alone, right? And the better relationship you have with your partners, we're all in it together, the better the outcome is. When you can challenge each other, when you can talk about the different strengths of each person on the team and bring things together, is how I led, or how I helped launch anything that we did. It certainly wasn't because I always knew what I was doing, because we only know
Sure.
the past, right? And we learn and we grow, but we have to be able to feel that we're taking a calculated risk with our team members that are all in it for the same reason. And that's truly the benefit of having good partners and treating them as such and not outsiders, because we are all in it together. Every agency that I worked with was a partner of mine. Every vendor, everything we developed on the back of an envelope, everything that we've done through time has been for the greater good, and not just for me. It was for not just the company, but for the consumer, right? So like, if we always look at what is best for the consumer and how do we, put our best foot forward, it was always a team effort. It's interesting to be part of a company that not only developed new products to make the consumer's life better, more engaging, more entertaining, all the things that we did, we also changed the media landscape. So video on demand changed commercial TV buying. The Comcast, the internet service, before it even had a name, when it was just high speed internet, was changing how people used used online. This was kind of part of me days before the online evolution. So we were doing both at the same time, which was an interesting dichotomy of making it happen and also changing what I knew, which was your traditional media that developed into every other aspect of media, which really was in part to a lot of what those telecoms, specifically Comcast and others, have done to change that landscape and make it, give that ability to everyone, to consumers, businesses, etc. So I mean, most of that really does have to do with partnership and looking at what is the best value for the consumer and how do we go for it. We did not always succeed. We certainly had our oops, but you know what? We got back up and kept going. We also made sure we didn't put all our eggs in one basket. We made sure that we had
Sure.
a media mix that would help build the brand, demonstrate the various components of anything we were launching, whether it was Xfinity across the country. When we had voice, we launched that. We launched Xfinity Home, like all of these things that had been launched through the years was always due to great partnerships across the board.
That's great. I can remember very specifically when Xfinity was brought into to phase, right? Because it didn't exist previously, right? We all know that, and now it's part of vernacular, but it's still, at least to consumers, especially those who live in areas like ours in Philadelphia and like traditional, we'll call it Comcast country areas, right? It's considered Comcast Xfinity, or like at least from consumer brand. Like you really, can't really give up those things. I remember we were talking recently, and I want to bring this up a little bit just to kind of like riff on this for a second. We saw recently that Max, right, the online app, content app, has rebranded itself back to HBO Max, and in thinking that through a little bit, I'm like, well, of course they did. They lost their best part of their brand in HBO. HBO is if you chose between the two, between HBO and Cinemax, and you don't even have Cine, you have Max. What are you going to pick? Well, let's just say it the way it is. It's definitely going to be HBO. That opening theme song, growing up as a kid, watching whatever it was that was coming on next. Usually in my house at that certain time might have been a Steven Spielberg show, a movie of some type of that time. oh my gosh, like I was so excited, so excited. So to see them lose that brand and now bring it back in, that's a calculated risk that I think every large brand tries to take, and some of them just, as you said before, whoops, we failed. Wait, oops, right? That's a great way to describe it. That goes into it. So I could totally see that as a vehicle, or at least it's something that we kind of just dismiss, especially when a new brand agency or new CMO or someone has this genesis of an idea to scuttle what your brand has been historically. Jaguar has just done it, just fired their agency as well. I mean, if you look back at what it was versus what it is, same thing. So, one of the things I really want to ask you about is someone who's been in media, who's been responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in media spend, annually. Talk to me about what a brand means, in a media like mix, if you will, like, because we find so often, especially when you're dealing with business owners, people who may not, this is not their day jobs of working in media all the time. There's not as much of an appreciation for the brand, meaning their brand, and how that is important in really, earning the trust and respect and responsibility, all those things that go with it. And, they just want to see leads. Digital's here, so I can measure everything. So, it must be Google and it must be leads. So, talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in past and what even some of the research that, that I know you guys poured, millions of dollars into, frankly, into that value of brand and what that means to a consumer and what it should really mean to a media schedule.
Brand is everything. To your point of Max versus HBO, you spend there's a lot of equity in having that brand. And for Comcast, the brand didn't mean that much to a consumer. Xfinity and spending a lot of effort, it's not even just money, a lot of effort in building it into a personality for their products that didn't really have a name. Comcast is the company, Xfinity is the products, Apple's the company. So, but when you're building a brand, you're building a personality. You're building something that means something to people. So when we look at people want companies that do well, or do well for others, that give back to society or to the earth, and a lot of sustainability efforts that are happening. That's part of the brand. That's not part of the acquisition. So when you have and you want to protect that, you have to protect that part of it so that a person can know, whether they're in the market or not, that they know that the brand and that it stands for something, that it needs to stand for something. When and I've certainly seen this through the years, and it's we like that we have, as a media person, we have a better opportunity to measure and we can look at results, and we all want that instant gratification, like, yay, we got a lead. Or that something worked. But what we're not always conscious of is everything else that's happening behind the scenes that it's making that one thing work. Back in probably the early 2000s, I guess, with Comcast, we started using econometric modeling, which you could see the impact of all the media, not one medium, not one vendor, not Meta, who has the stronghold on information that isn't necessarily easily shared with other partners, that you can see a bigger picture. And it's still, you have to take more into it than just data. But when you start looking at the brand impact on the bottom line, brand is first. And then you may want to buy something, but you have to know the brand first. And what happens now, and we start seeing all these campaigns that are so focused on lead gen or the ROAS, what is that cost per advertising spend? We're basically taking anybody in the market that's interested, and we're using up the entire funnel, and using those dollars just to get somebody either that's already interested or will purchase, but we're not worried about tomorrow. And without tomorrow, we don't have a brand. So we have to look at a balancing act. Everything is a balancing act. If marketing was easy, everybody would do it, and it's not. There's a lot that goes into making these type of decisions of looking at what's good for today, but looking at what's good for tomorrow. And what's good for tomorrow is building a brand that can sustain time, like grow or die. So part of this is when once you kind of like take everything that there's today, then you have to spend that much more money to build your brand for people who don't know you. So I get worried when there's too much focus on all we need is acquisition, which is not true. We need the balance of protecting our brand for tomorrow, for people that are going to come into the market, and get the leads or the subscribers or the sales for today. So it definitely has been, it's been a struggle because with digital, with programmatic came in, all of these different type of things, like just all of the, you can see results today makes it dangerous for what we know as marketers that we actually need for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it seems like in companies where maybe a CFO or someone in finance is running the budgeting for marketing, as an example, right? Or has a very heavy influence on those matters, that they are the ones that are all lead gen, lead gen, lead gen, lead gen, and don't have the appreciation of what you need to do in order and how to calculate really a true ROAS as the entire media spend as it relates to your customer base and the number of whether it's a transaction or subscriber or whatever, instead of that one little click that happens to end up being, let's just say it out loud, given credit to Google for, right? They receive that final click credit, and it becomes almost like that click drug.
It
Oh
is,
my
it
gosh.
is. And like it definitely comes down to, we saw this with search, right? Search was like branded search. Well, branded search, which is very valuable, don't get me wrong, but it basically was back in our day, the yellow pages. So you're paying for somebody that already is interested in you to come see you. Of course, it's much more elaborate than it used to be. But having that last click mindset means everything would go to branded search, and you're never going to find somebody that's actually interested in your product. They're really just looking for your phone number, address,
Right.
website. So, and I don't want to downplay the value of all of it. It's a mix. And I want to keep reiterating the point that it's the mix that works. It's finding the mix that's difficult.
Yes.
It's
A
not
hundred
the
percent.
need for the
Right.
mix. It's finding the right mix that is going to optimize your spend, because we all want that. We all want to optimize the spend, but we don't want to be short-sighted into how to get there. When we first started doing the econometric modeling, one thing we needed to do was prove that brand had value for Comcast.
Sure.
And what we ended up finding out was not only did brand lift short-term and long-term ROI for Comcast, but brand is an acquisition driver as well. So nothing that we do is one or the other. We try to categorize it because we need it categorized, not because the consumer ever categorizes and says, "Oh, that was an acquisition ad. I should buy now." Or, "Oh, that was a brand ad. Good for them." Like, so it all works together, which goes back to what we try to find is the best mix that is going to deliver what we need for today and tomorrow at the least possible cost, right? Because we're all
Sure.
cost conscious.
Yeah.
Finance is right about being cost conscious. They definitely need to be, but we need to
Don't
be
tell me
smart
that out
about.
loud.
They do. They do. I'm not anti-finance.
Yeah, no, you're
But
not
some
wrong
of that
about that.
part is when we need to reduce costs, what's the first thing that gets cut? Every company.
Yeah.
Advertising.
Advertising.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Oops, we
Media.
have to put that back. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it is a fact, and it's not necessarily the right thing to do. It's usually not the right thing to do, because
No.
again, without it today, you have no tomorrow, and that's the part that gets forgotten when we're doing those cuts or whatever's happening from a finance perspective or a company perspective that's looking to create a savings, and it's an easy line item. Underneath that line item is a whole lot of depth and and thought and purpose that we're trying to keep a brand active in the minds of a consumer, which is who we want to reach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in a lot of the brands that I've worked with over the years, and that in campaigns you and I have even worked on together, you see such different aspects to the brands as to like if is it all acquisition based or is it all branding based, and it really isn't just one thing. It should there should be a concert of instruments of media, right? I go back to my music days and say, this is the way it should work, right? I have my horn section over here, which is one type of media. I have my strings over here. I have my woodwinds here, percussion, beating the drum, and they all work in concert together. And then you have one heck of a nice symphony, right? It really gives you the music that you're looking for. Same thing is very true when it comes to media and the way that works together. And it's sometimes it can be, especially again, I go back to, either someone in finance or again, a lot of times a business owner, and you have these conversations and you explain to them, why things such as like reviews matter, why, treating your customers a certain way, or long term, it's going to matter to you, right? Because you're going to, you reap what you sow. And it really can be a challenge sometimes, really conveying that until, the cash register doesn't ring any longer, or leads start to dry up, and you're like, well, what just happened? We're spending the same amount in search that we did all these years. What else is happening? Well, when 90% of your budget is search, and you won't let your media agency or your media, team really explore other media types as a way to, move the needle. Yeah, unfortunately, at some point, it's going to run out. It's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? At least that's what we've seen, and we preach that as much as possible to all of our clients, because it really is. We've seen it just happen too many times, across the board. So, I want to switch gears here a little bit, as we get close to the end here. As I said, we're the elder statesmen. I mentioned that before, and I think that's okay. We were always the younger people. I don't understand.
I know. I don't know
How
what
this
happened.
happened.
I don't know.
I
I'm
don't know.
not sure.
But one day, kids, it happens to all of us.
One day I walked in and I was
Yes.
not even the mother. I wasn't the grandmother. So it was like,
Here we
wait,
are.
what?
Yeah,
What?
we're now here. So, talk to me about, what, your son is in media, right? He's in marketing now. I think
Nice to meet you.
8+ years. I've known him since he was frankly in like think junior high, I'm pretty sure. So, talk to
He's
me,
been he's been at the agency almost 8 years.
oh my gosh. Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. No, I'm stretching my face to try to
Yeah,
like get
like
the wrinkles away.
grandpa.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
I
But I
know.
mean, he has a director role at a big agency in New York, and has done great things. But like, when he got into it, and even now that he might be a mentor to people coming in, what do you say? What do you like? What do you tell people that when they're looking to get into marketing, and maybe it's agency, it's client side, it's digital, it's social, it's whatever. What paths and recommendations would you give them? I'm sure your voice would be great in this.
Thank you. It's funny when my son said he wanted to go into media, I was like, but there's a whole world out there. Like, and I felt that he should explore. And he said, "Yeah, but you like what you do." And I said, "Well, I can't argue with that because I loved my career. I love my career. I love media and how creative we can be in that world." And I was like, "Oh, true." So
Yeah.
yes, what I would say, and even in watching him like seriously grow and flourish, has been amazing. I You have to love what you do. First of all, you have to love it. You also have to know that you don't know everything. And marketing is so broad there's so many aspects to it. You're never going to know everything. This kind of goes back to partner with the right people, have good teams, work together and learn as much as you can, but bring in your part. Believe I definitely believe in starting on agency side before going client side. I think there's value in the numbers of people that have been there that can help fill in some of that gap from back in the day when it was only like TV, radio, print, magazine, those kind of things, to a whole plethora of opportunity. But you kind of need to know those basics and not get caught up in that shiny penny of today. You have to look at every aspect based on what your customer needs, wants, does, acts. So I think it is kind of like going eyes wide open, listen, learn, dig in, and always be curious. Just keep learning and growing. There's so much, and we have been fortunate. I have been fortunate that we picked an area that is ever changing, like almost daily. We're seeing changes, and that kind of keeps us young. It
Yeah.
has. It definitely has kept us young.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so like it's an exciting venture. It's an exciting journey. And you know what? Do it as long as you love it, and if not, then move on. But I think there's so much opportunity to explore that anybody that has an interest in marketing, try it and see if you like it. But don't get caught up in thinking that you know everything, because I don't know everything. We don't know everything, but we will always have our eyes open and always want to learn and grow and try new things. And that's the world in which marketing is.
Yeah, absolutely. On that, I'm going to piggyback on that so just a little bit. So on occasion we have an opening, right? Something pops up, and what I see oftentimes, especially with people coming right out of school, because of their unique position in where media started for them, right? They'll say where the clock started, so to speak, right? That timer kicked off of their media experience. They're now the first generation that's had social media from day one, right? From the day that they were born, their parents are posting on Facebook or somewhere else, or their lives are captured, and now they've captured their own selves, right, in the media. So it seems, if I post a social media opening of any site, I'll have 250 applicants within a couple weeks. Like it's amazing. But it's because everyone wants to jump into it because they know, how to post on Instagram, or they might know TikTok, but they don't know media. They don't know what role that media type can play. They see an influencer, or, someone who's blown up, gone viral, or maybe one of their videos has, gained more than 1,000 likes or something like that, and or views, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm now an influencer. I need to, do all these things. But media is so much more than that. So understanding what role social can play in it, but it's not the only media type. And you, again, to your point, be curious, and then be open to understanding that just because it impacted you doesn't mean it impacts everyone. And at least I've found that every generation, our experiences change just that so much more, that if you talk to a boomer versus now Gen Alpha, right, it's a totally different thing. So like the experience, what they find relevant, important, all those things are so different. But to be truly good at this, in my opinion, you have to have an appreciation for all of it. You can't
Yes,
just rely on that one media type to say, oh, this is what it is, and I'm just going to be really good at this. Okay, maybe you are.
absolutely.
But
But you know
if
what?
you're going to be good at our job, it's not that.
It's not that. And I would say that, first of all, as soon as whether you're working at a Comcast or an IKEA, or you're working at an agency, you're no longer that consumer. So
Yeah.
you have to look outside of yourself and the habits of others.
A
So putting that
great way to
consumer
say it.
right in
Yes.
the center and saying, so just because I do something does not mean everybody does. Certainly doesn't mean nobody does, but it doesn't mean my customer does, or my potential customer, the person I'm trying to attract. So sometimes I feel like it's better to not be like, you don't have to watch TV to know that when you can look and see that there's ratings, or you don't have to be a football fan to know that sports is an attracts males and females and a very captive audience. So when you start learning these different things, it's not about your personal experience, it's your professional experiences and your professional insights and knowledge that you're gaining through others, through data, through insights, through consumer driven understanding. It is absolutely not what I think, it's what I believe the customer thinks
Yeah.
and wants and does. And I say think because consumers are so complex. So we have all the data, but you could be driving to one fast food chain and say, "Oh wait, I just saw something," and turn off, and we'll never see that insight, right? So I can
Yeah.
say we can truly believe and see the numbers and see the data, but thinking that people act like you do when you are not the customer base just because of your knowledge and working on the brand, then you kind of like you already kind of shot yourself in the foot,
Yeah.
with
If
being open to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a consumption bias, right?
It is a
That
consumption bias.
that we all go through, right? So if this is the way I do it. So it must mean that's the way. No, no, that's not what it means at all.
Right.
Let the data tell you. We talk about that a lot here.
Yep.
Let the
Let the
data
data
tell you.
have the
Right.
conversation, speak
Yeah.
with others. But really, the one thing of putting that consumer at the table, like to the point of putting something in its place. I am the consumer. I am the intended target. Oh, and by the way, there's not just one.
Yeah.
There's many different audiences that
And
we try
segments
to
inside of
address.
that.
But when you have that faux person at the table, you're not talking about my opinion versus your opinion. We're talking about the needs, wants, and actions of that consumer, that audience, the persona, whatever, at the table. And then it stops the conversation from being personal, to professional and professional guidance based on data and knowledge, and not what my opinion is because I do it or don't do it, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, that's again when we deal with clients that don't have necessarily dedicated marketing department, that's often the education that needs to come into play, right? To have that conversation to say, don't consider yourself that one person and that bias of how everyone, well, it must be because this is the way I do it. It's just not the way it works. It's, and
It's
let the
not.
data rule the roost,
I know.
so to speak.
But you know what? On the advertising side, there's always been that one thing you purchase, because I remember back in the day having to buy Letterman because it was the only show the CEO
Right?
watched.
The CEO watch. Right,
Buying a
there you go.
billboard because it was en route, to work from one of the, like, the senior person's home. Like, we've all had to do things like that, but that is
Sure.
not the right approach.
No, it's definitely
And you
not.
don't want to sink a whole lot of money there, because
No.
that is not the right approach. You really have to look outside of yourself when you get into marketing, and look at be really curious about others, other people, their behaviors, what they do, how they think, and then be really excited about measurement and looking at what can we prove or disprove, that's going to help us try again, because there's never truly that answer. We get learnings, things change, people change, and we keep going, but we always have to take that analytical look, and say, did this work this time? It may not work next time. How do we change it and try to get a little bit better?
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah,
trend
absolutely.
in all of this, to know what maybe we've wiped out that opportunity because we focus too much on acquisition, and we're now our return on advertising spend has gone down. And why is that? Did we kind of already use up what we had in that bucket?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been great. Really, like I think we've
Love
covered a lot of ground. See, I told you this would go like
you.
that because I know.
Still owe me lunch.
Yeah, I okay.
I'm not taking that back.
Apparently, it's still over lunch. You're on. Thank you. This has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time and in sharing your experience, your knowledge base. We're sitting at almost 40 minutes here of just chatting. I'm sure we're going to cut this down a little bit here and there. But this has been great. I so thank you, my friend. I so
Thank you,
appreciate it.
my friend. Thank you for
Yeah,
everything, my friend, as you
of
know.
course.
Like,
Yeah, and
and
back
now
at
I'm
you.
going to get those tears again because it has been, we have been on quite a journey together.
Yes, we certainly have, and we'll share that with everybody one day in the future, but not today. So, thanks again. Okay, be well, and
Thank you.
we'll
You
talk
too.
soon. Okay,
All
thanks
right.
soon.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
See you. Bye.